What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growing Up Gaming, your weekly podcast where we meet a new person of the internet to discuss their childhood with gaming and how it inspired their lives today. My name is Mitch Power. Again, I can't thank you guys enough for your continued support. Hopefully you subscribe. Check us out every Tuesday with the new episodes on iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher and wherever you guys find the show. This week we have our guest. His name is Michael Neave. I met this gentleman on the Comedy Button Facebook group. He sent me a message, says, hey, I want to be on your show. It sounds cool. And I said, okay. So we set up a recording. So we get into some stories about his childhood and also someone close to him and how he taught him a new game that he continues to play to this date. If you guys ever want to be on an episode of the show, please send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 or go ahead and send me a tweet at the podcast channel's Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast. Without further ado, let's get started with Michael Neave. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fremont, California. It's a small town in the East Bay area. So,
definitely glad to hear more West Coast people, because I've had a lot of East Coast people.
Yeah. So gaming didn't really become a big part of my life until so there was this guy that lived down the street that I played with a lot. His name was Bryce, and we I don't remember how we kind of became friends. I guess I just saw him riding his bike, but he introduced me to the PS2 when I was 6 years old. It was kind of like this magical thing where I was like, whoa, video games exist. 'Cause that was really my first kind of, exposure to it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
So you don't remember, so you were basically 6 PS2. Do you remember going into any of the stores or seeing games beforehand, or that was really one of your first experiences with it?
I would say that that's my first experience. I guess subconsciously I always knew they existed, but that's what started to actually get me to become interested in video games. I don't remember what game we played. I remember we played a lot of Tekken at his house, and
that was probably
racing
Tekken
games
tag tournament, I assume. Because especially
maybe
those PS2 times, that's probably what it was, if I remember right. I actually wasn't as big into the fighting stuff, so I just remember I used to work at Game Crazy where I sold the video games, so I saw pretty much a ton of games coming in and out all the time. So I do remember those. Did you ever? So what ended up being your first console then? Was it a PS2?
Yeah, my first console was a PS2. I think about a week after playing games with Bryce, I kind of went home and started, begging my parents to buy me a PS2. And eventually they got the money, and then they did.
Nice. Did you get it for a birthday or a Christmas present, or?
You know what? I don't remember. I think it may have been a advanced birthday present or something like that. But yeah, it was pretty cool, and that was my first console, and that was the thing I played on for a really long time, up until the PS3 days. Did you ever have any particular games did you ever have any hobbies that came before gaming that kind of led into you buying certain games for your system or anything like that? When you're 6, I don't know, I read books and things like that, children's books. When you're 6 years old, there's really not that much that you can say that you're into. I think that's one reason why gaming is so important to me, is because it was literally the first thing where I could identify. It was the first identifier I could attach to myself, oh yeah, I am a gamer. But yeah, as far as what I wanted to play, the first, whatever games Bryce had that we were playing together, I would sometimes want, those. I can't really remember, any specifically.
Were you an only child, or did you have brothers and sisters that would play with you quite often, or any parents that were into it with you or anything?
Both of my parents are not into games. My dad played Halo on my computer one time, and he actually did finish it, but that's the only game that he's ever played all the way through. And I was surprised by it. I do have a sister, and she played with me a tiny bit, but very rarely. She never really was that into it. It was definitely something that I was exclusively into in my family. Yeah. Beyond that, I definitely had friends that I played with. It was kind of like a community, because I'd come to school and talk about the games that I've been playing, and they've been talking about the games that they've playing. And of course, these were the days before like digital distribution, so we would trade with each other and things like that. We'd borrow from each other. Like, I borrowed games, PS2 games from my cousins like all the time. That's how I played Sly 2 for the first time, which ended up being one of my favorite childhood games. That's how I played Metal Gear Solid 3, which I kind of had to play on the DL because I wasn't allowed to play rated M games at the time.
Right.
But yeah, it was a great experience. Like that. This is jumping ahead though. That was like when I was like 10 years old is when I played Metal Gear Solid 3 and just fell in love with the game.
So were your parents really strict when it came to not wanting you to play certain games, or were they pretty open to the fact that gaming was a thing and that you were allowed to do it and they encouraged it, but then they would just encourage you not to play, or they would basically prohibit you from playing certain games?
It's somewhere in between, because so my parents, they're pretty laissez-faire about it. They have been for a while, but when I was very young, it was a new medium to them. I mean, my parents are Generation Xers, and so they don't really know, that much about video games. And the more they saw me playing violent games, I think the more they were like, it's not turning him into a bad person or anything like that. But the one person that I have to thank for actually, opening my parents' mind up for that is, so one of my cousins, his name was Kim, and so I'm from the Philippines, I have a Filipino descent, and so I've gone there a couple times, and over there they have internet cafes, and one of the biggest games there at the time when I went there was Counter-Strike 1.6 or whatever.
Of course. Yes.
And we would go in there for days upon days, because they're in every single mall there in the Philippines, and we would just play with the people in there. And my parents saw me playing Counter-Strike, and they had a chat with him, and he basically said, look, it's not that bad. And Counter-Strike Source became the first rated M game that I owned.
Okay.
After that, yeah, it's actually kind of unfortunate. This is a point where the story gets a little sad, because Kim actually died somewhat recently.
Oh, jeez.
And I remember he died when I was 14, and I remember that was the first death in the family for me, and going through that was really hard. But I played a lot of Counter-Strike that week, that's for sure, just in memory of him being thank you for introducing me to this, thank you for getting me into PC gaming, which is my main platform now. Well,
and I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that at least, you do have those types of things out there where, my grandma, I remember playing certain games, or she got me games, and, that's something that, it helps bring people, brings up the memories, brings up the good times, instead of reflecting on any sadness that you have and everything at the moment. So, that's great though that, he was able to get you into that. And also too, kind of broadening your parents' eyes when it came to gaming, and, especially the violent games and stuff. Cause that's always the one fear that, some people have out there when it comes to the games that, my mom thought Mortal Kombat was going to make me go rip people's hearts out of their chests. And I told him, no, Mom, I'm not a crazy person, and that's, some parents are out there that are accepting of it, and then some people are just not accepting of it at all. They don't encourage their kids to play games, Thankfully, I understand gaming, and, I'm happy at least now that kids, when they're growing up today, my kids, they are lucky enough to have a parent that knows gaming and knows that it doesn't have these harmful side effects playing Grand Theft Auto and listening to Marilyn Manson will make you a teen killer. No, it won't. But as long as you parent them, you're fine. Granted, there are certain games I still don't let my kids play. I guess it depends on the game. My son has played Call of Duty and Battlefield and stuff, but certain games like Gears of War are a little wow, I don't want him just seeing somebody getting cut into pieces.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, at least your parents were more open afterwards and everything. So that's
good. Well, I don't think they were never like, oh, hey, it's gonna turn him into a bad person. I think they looked at it a lot like movie violence, where it's just like, well, he's not ready to see that yet. You know, it's like, it's too much for him. You know, he's not ready for it. But I think like Kim really helped them see like, hey, I am mature enough for this. You know, I understand that it's just make believe and people don't go around shooting other people all the time. You know, that sort of thing.
Right.
But yeah, and Counter-Strike was one of the biggest games of my childhood. If we're moving past the PS2 days, which, I mean, if you have any more questions about that.
Yeah. Then. So as far as it goes, so you went PS2 route, and then did you, like you said, you kind of got into Counter-Strike and stuff like that. Did you kind of go more straight PC route, or did you kind of continue the trend with console gaming?
I did. I jumped back and forth between for a while. The main reason was because the PC I had at the time could really only run Source Engine games from 2004, and that was like it. You know, that was the highest it went. So I ran Counter-Strike on this really crappy PC for the longest time, and I also played Halo on the same PC, but that was my first like big kind of entry into online gaming and the kind of social interactions that come with that.
Yeah, all those
and
fun
looking
times.
back at that now, you know, I was like 8 or 9 and I was probably not ready for it. I didn't have a mic or anything and I hardly ever talked, but just hearing you know, that banter back and forth and the constant shit talk probably wasn't good for my psyche at that age.
Yeah, that's the one last thing that I hold off with my son. Like, he continues to ask, you know, I want to play online, and that's the only thing I'm like, I can't handle you hearing how somebody wants to do awful things to your mom. Like, that's probably not really good for you to hear at this age. So that's the only concern that I have, is just like, you know, now it's not, you know, content wise, like, I can gauge my son. Like, I know my son's, I ask him all the time, like, you know, this is fake, right? He's like, yes, Dad, I know. So he's aware, but the online stuff is where things get next level. Like, I cannot deal with you hearing some awful things that people say without any consequence. So yeah, I can imagine, you know, back in the Wild West days where it was, I'm not going to say worse, but it wasn't any better. Like, it was pretty up there still as far as the level of the awful things you would hear. I
mean, this was like 2006. So like, you know, there weren't news stories going around about the constant shit talking over Xbox Live. You know, I think that my parents probably to this day don't really understand like the type of banter that goes on in these games. You know, they just know that I'm old enough to deal with it with you know, whatever it is. But like back then, I'm pretty sure they had no idea the type of thing that I was listening to, especially in a game like Counter-Strike, where like a lot of the people you meet in there are talk very, very dirty and talk about the worst things you could possibly imagine. And, you know, there's like 8-year-old me sitting on the computer listening to this shit, you know, a young and impressionable mind. And, you know, I don't know how much that actually, you know, affected me, but I know to this day, like, hey, I probably, like, you know, I shouldn't have been listening to that, you know, it was bad.
Did you ever, around that age, did you ever get in trouble for like swearing? Did you ever like swear in front of anybody, or like, cause obviously when you hear it on a consistent basis, like, it kind of becomes just baked in your head, where sometimes it slips out. Did you ever slip up in front of your mom or say something and she's like, what did you just say? Like,
I actually didn't really slip up. That came later. Our kitchen was our PC was in the kitchen, and my mom was like cooking in there all the time. So, you know, like you can't really get away with anything there.
Right.
No, the getting caught swearing came later, when we moved away to a different house and the PC was in a more private location.
So you thought you had free range to go, and then it was still, within earshot.
Well, it would still be like, guys, we need to take out these fuckers. You know, it'd be like, cause I knew that they were just right outside the door. Like, we had this, so to backpedal,
that's so funny.
In about, 2011, we moved from California to Denver, Colorado, which is where I am now.
Right.
And Video games actually helped me a lot through that because that's when my social anxiety started to get to me. I have moderate social anxiety. It's going away, luckily, the older I get, but back then it was pretty bad, and I moved at the same time, which is like a recipe for disaster. And it was nice because whenever I felt really lonely, like video games were there. I'm trying to think of what games I was playing during that time period.
Was it more still like the Counter-Strike stuff, like just doing that, or did you move on eventually, like when you moved and everything? Did you ever move on as far as from PS2 and everything? Like, did you ever go up to like PS3 or Xbox 360 or anything like that?
So I still have a PS3. But I remember what I was playing then. By then it was a lot of like single player console games. This was before wireless internet was just a regular thing. Right. Okay, well, to backpedal more. So sorry, this is terrible, but I started playing PS3 basically when it came out in 2007. I got it as a birthday present, and it was a nice surprise because my parents did the whole "you're not going to get it for your birthday" sort of thing, and I was like, "Oh, that's fine,
classic gem.
That'll be okay." Yeah, and then I opened it, and I was like, "Wow, a PS3!" And like hooking that shit up to a CRT monitor and seeing it go was like really magical because like the jump between PS3 and PS4. Like, yeah, it's impressive, but it was not as impressive, like, as PS2 to PS3.
Yeah, it was
like, that shit was so incredible to look at. So the first game I played on it was MotorStorm because it came with every launch console.
Right.
And that game was, I'm not really into racing games, but it was certainly a spectacle. And, I remember all of my friends, like, sitting around me because I had a birthday party, watching me play and being like, oh, look at those graphics.
Amazed.
It's amazing.
Oh my God. Look at the graphics. Look at the water. Look at the dirt fly up. Oh my God.
Yeah. And then, man, like, I traded in a bunch of my PS3 games. Like, I'm looking at my shelf right now, and a lot of the original ones I had weren't there. But, I think, after that, one of the things that I wanted to play that was only on PS3 was Metal Gear Solid 4. Which, wasn't as good as 3, but it was a really good looking game for the time when it came out. And, I borrowed that one from my cousins too. Yeah, I borrowed a lot of games off of them, actually.
Well, I mean, and that's always a good thing because you always have that, family out there that'll let you borrow their stuff and play their stuff. And, I mean, that's always fun, too, because, I mean, that was the whole thing is that not everybody had access to the same games that everybody else did. So, you always had that type of situation where, you had to share games or at least, that was back before digital was as prevalent, like you said earlier. Like, now digital's kind of hampered that unless you have somebody that you trust where you could do game sharing. But, for the most part, it's all, no more sharing is just more now. It's just instead of sharing the game, you're more people on YouTube watching people play the game instead of experiencing themselves. So that's kind of what more people are doing now. So, so you remember, you were saying you got more into the single player stuff. So like Metal Gear, what else were you playing then?
Red Dead when that came out, definitely. My dad actually walked in on me during the sex scene of that fucking game, and I got in trouble. And I was like, "Wow, like that was just terrible RNG there." Like he could have walked in at any other time and been like, "Oh, he's just shooting bandits,
dragging
it's
somebody
fine."
behind your horse,
Yeah, and I remember that specifically because that was like the first time my dad like legit like sweared in front of me. He's like, "What the fuck are you watching?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, it's just part of a game." Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Super mad. Like, next level mad. Like, blood red mad. Like, what
no,
he actually,
he didn't get that mad. He actually he kind of like just said that and then left the room. And then we had a conversation about it earlier and I was like, yeah, it was just a scene in a game. I'm like, you just walked in at the wrong time. Like, I swear the whole game isn't like that. And then he understood, that I didn't mean anything by it. And so.
It's not like you were intentionally like, that's the game loop. Like, it's not like you just went back to the same person. You're like,
it's not like I was playing like Hot Coffee or anything like that.
Right, exactly.
So like,
dude, the Hot Coffee thing was so, it was, I understand why, because I was working at a store when it happened. Like when they had to pull the, it was weird because it was not something that was easily accessible. It's not like as simple as like you putting in a code.
It's kind of like World War I in that I still don't know what caused it, because I just remember it being like, oh, there are files on the disk that you can access if you know how to hack it. And then I'm like, well, most people aren't going to go through that way to see some dumb sex mini games, so what's the issue?
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, the one issue is that, like, especially with the internet getting bigger and bigger and bigger, is the fact that when people could find out how to do it and it was out there for people to do it, then you would assume like a lot of people would do it, which would just make Grand Theft Auto look bad. So then they had to pull, like, I remember we had to put adult only stickers on the cases. Like, they still sold those, but then eventually they got to a point where they were like, no guys, like we have to pull all these games. We have to ship you new ones. If anybody comes in asking for a swap out, like, it was crazy.
Yeah, and it's also insane because San Andreas is the #1 selling PS2 game of all time.
Right.
So, like, and they still had that scandal, yet it still sold crazy amounts.
That didn't hurt. I mean, again, like, the thing is that if there's a scandal out there, it's going to only increase people's interest in it. You know what I mean? Like, most of the time, unless it's some real next level awful thing, like, most of the time it won't tank something. It'll just only end up making it more popular. So, like that. And then obviously certain people would buy games like Mass Effect to do the sex scenes knowing that they were in the game. So, I mean, it's stupid, but,
which that was blown out of proportion.
Yeah, well, I mean, most things with gaming usually are, right? Like, most games,
that is
most
true.
things are blown out of proportion. Like, they will show it on Fox News or the news or any of the news outlets. Like, oh my God, look at like when the Facebook killer thing happened, which was completely awful. Any news organization who compared that to, like, oh, he was playing Call of Duty, that's how he knew how to. I'm like, dude, please stop. Like, please stop. Even though, yes, it was first person and it was terrible and it was the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because this person played Call of Duty does not mean that's why he's doing it. It's not like he saw that in Call of Duty and goes, that's an interesting angle to shoot people. No, like, people are bad. Like, there's bad people out in the world without video games being around.
I was actually talking to my dad recently and I'm like, man, like, not saying I would, but, like, if I went on a mass shooting and people saw my Steam account, man, video games would be banned forever. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, my Steam account is, like, filled with the most violent of violent things.
Well, again, people are just looking for a reason to explain why it happens. Like, not the fact that he might have been a crazy person, but, let's just look at it. And I mean, obviously, every mass tragedy has this problem, and I mean, obviously it's unfortunate and nobody wants any of the stuff to happen, but to continually go back to one thing is like, this is the reason why these keep happening, is kind of ridiculous. But I mean, that always tends to be the case, unfortunately. So
it just happens with new media in general. It's new, it's scary, and video games are starting to become less new, and so there's less blame being put on them.
Well, back in the day, Elvis's music was the devil and it's making people like, all right, guys, I get it. It's Elvis. Yeah. I guess and it's so funny because now you look back and see how tame, like how things have just progressed, and you sit there and look back and go, wow, that was scaring people. Like, Elvis gyrating his hips was really that terrifying to, like, middle America that, it's just funny because, again, we're going to get to a point where 30 years from now, you're going to have people in Congress and, like, in government, and they're just going to go, yeah, video games don't make people crazy. I played video games and I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's just going to get to that point eventually. So then you went from, so you kind of went PS3 route, and then did you ever upgrade to, like, PS4, Xbox One, any of that stuff, or you're now pretty much PC gaming only?
Well, I want a PS4 for one game, and that game is called Persona 5.
Yep.
But I don't have a PS4 yet. I'm hoping to get one and then play that game and then probably sell it because I have no other use for it.
But I was gonna say, like, that's the one, the Japanese RPGs. Some of them come to PC, but with Persona,
I was hoping they would do it because a ton of Final Fantasy games have been finding a new audience on Steam right now. So I had high hopes, but then they said, yeah, we're just keeping it on PlayStation. I was like, oh no. I might have to spend money.
Unless they have some sort of exclusivity deal where it has to be on there for X number of years. I mean, you also look at certain games and you wouldn't imagine they'd come to Steam, and then eventually they do as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, I guess it just depends and everything.
And
so.
you can't emulate PS4 or 3 games, unfortunately. Not yet. I'm hoping that one day, because I've been playing Persona 4 on PS2 emulator, and it's fantastic. I'm running it at 1080p, and it looks great. So
that's great.
Not that game needs a lot of bells and whistles, but it's just nice to have. Yeah, there was like 1 week, like 2 or 3 weeks have gone by, like not this week because I've been really busy, but like the weeks before, where just constant Persona, like that's it. It's like I get home from college, and then it's just like I'm playing Persona until 1:30, and then yeah.
Yeah, basically, right?
I've put like 50 hours into that, or nearly 60 hours into that game in like the span of 3 weeks, which is pretty bad for me.
Yeah, like, everybody has those moments where you have that much free time to be able to do that stuff. I remember when my wife was having a baby, and I was off on maternity leave, I put so many hours into video games in such a short time, because it was kind of just like, we were having a baby, and it's just like, I guess I can hang out at home and the baby's sleeping and you're sleeping because you're tired. So yeah, I'm just going to sit here and play all these games. And yeah, I remember putting a ton of hours into Zelda and like a lot of the handheld stuff a lot too, especially when I was at the hospital. I would just bring my DS and like just play Mario Kart like for hours and hours and hours. So yeah, I mean, you always have those moments where you have the time and everything, so that way you can just go nuts and play games. Luckily my son, I got my Switch a couple of days ago, and he's been playing Zelda for about 14 hours in the past 3 days. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. He originally, I told him, I'm like, this game's supposed to be really good. I'll play it eventually, but I'm working. I got other stuff to do. He's like, all right, I'm going to play Zelda. And then I go up there and I'm like, how is it? He's like, it's amazing, Dad. I'm like, yeah, I know I told you that. And he doesn't want to stop playing. And, when he comes downstairs now after dinner, he goes and gets the Switch and goes and sits on the couch and keeps playing it. I'm like, how you liking it? He's like, yeah, Dad, this game is amazing. I'm like, of course it is. So, now I'm like, great. I just told my wife, now we have to buy a second Switch. And she's like, yeah, you're real funny.
Yeah, I've never been that bad about like binge playing games. Back in my earlier days on the PS2 and PS3, of course I was a kid, and so I didn't really have much restraint. Which is why my parents actually limited me to only weekends, and that stayed constant up until I left for college.
Well, of course, you're a man. You could do what you want.
Well, yeah, but like even now, I'm like, it's not like I'm playing games all the time because I just don't have the time.
Sure.
I'm doing other stuff. But one last thing about Persona, one thing that's interesting is, so I go to film school, and the thing about film school is that your relationships with people are a lot more professional than they are friendly, because you're working together on films all the time. And Persona is kind of like a good way to be like, hey, I can have, surrogate connections with people through social links and things like that. It's like almost like a way for like I'm not going to say replacement, but it's kind of like scratching that itch for like deeper social interaction, because so much of that game is just about the characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it kind of like, it's hit me now in a good spot. The actual, so this is, I've never beaten the game, but this is like my second time trying to beat the game. And the first time I played it was like right after I moved, and it was like the perfect thing to play because, I was going through social anxiety. So like, I didn't have that many friends. I was making a couple, but like, and that game was there. And so, it was a good way to kind of, I don't know, just kind of like scratch that itch, I guess.
Well, yeah, everybody has, their own games, and especially specific times in your life too, that, you really want to play certain games for whatever reason it is, like it's always funny because, example, when I was younger, I lived in Illinois where there was snow prevalent. Now I live in Arizona. That's not even around anymore, which I'm okay with. But I remember only wanting to play snowboarding games in winter, and that was it. Oh. Like, you know what I mean? For whatever reason, like this was back in like Cool Borders days and stuff on PS1. Yeah. And I was just like, I really wanted snowboarding games for Christmas just because I was like, it's snowing outside. But then as soon as summer hit, I was like, I don't want to play snowboarding games. I don't want to do any of this. I want to go outside and do other stuff or play different games. I don't know, for whatever reason, that was always the case. So
no, I kind of associate certain games with seasons. So like the Metro games, I played those over Christmas while it was snowing and really yucky outside, and it kind of like it has a similar atmosphere to the game, and it was really nice actually. It made me feel, I don't know, it made me feel like I was playing it at the right time, you know. It was like, you know, it's really cold outside, and like in Metro, like everyone's in like the tunnels, you know, all just hanging out, and that game is like super immersive to begin with, and it was just a good time to play them.
Yeah, and that's how I felt recently with Dead Rising 4, which is, it's crazy because it's Christmas themed. Like,
right, yeah,
it
yeah.
literally is Christmas themed, and it came out right at the beginning of December, so I'm literally playing it, and when you like pause the menu, it's Christmas music, like mall Christmas music. I'm like, this is oddly perfect to play right now. Like, this is the absolute perfect game to play just because of the Christmas theme. Like, obviously you play that game in July, you don't have that same kind of, you know, like, you know, all of a sudden it just hits you all at once when you're pausing the game in between playing, and you're just like, this is exactly what the mall sounds like right now. Like, the mall sounds just like this. So yeah, it's just so funny how that happens. So so what are you playing now as far as like, what's your big game now? Like, do you think any games that you played before, like Counter-Strike and that type of stuff, has led you into playing certain games today?
Well, other than being introduced to the PC, I don't know. I don't think so. The only thing I think that Counter-Strike did was make me play a lot of online games, because I know people who hate playing online, they hate multiplayer. And with me, like, multiplayer is like my main dish. I'll play a single player game like Persona. Like, Persona is more like my side dish right now. But yeah, it got me into multiplayer gaming. It got me into, I like that kind of social aspect, especially when you play with the same people over and over again.
That's when it's always the best, when you have that core group that are always down to play, and you have the same times available and everything. That's when it's always the best.
So yeah, so I have that group now, and the way this happened was like, so you know, I was going through high school, and I had my first like kind of experience with a girl, breaking my heart. Oh no. So yeah, like, it was like the type of thing where, like, this is going to sound really naive now, but it was like, we went on one date, it went really well, and then it just went completely shit from there, and I was completely heartbroken. And that's when one of my old friends from the Counter-Strike Day of Defeat days contacted me and was like, hey, we're getting an Arma group together. And I was like, this is like the perfect fucking like antidote right now for my sadness. And that is how I got into Arma 3, which is my main game and has been for about 2 to 3 years now.
So you're still playing that as it sits right now, like that's still your main game and everything, and then Persona
it's my
that you play when no one else is around.
Yeah, it's my most played game on Steam, clocking in at about 500 hours, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot for me.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, well, you always hear certain people say, you know, oh, I have 2,000 hours in Dota 2, and I'm like,
yeah, and I'm like, oh my god,
insanity. That's insane to me. I don't know how you could possibly do that, but you know, like I don't have much time for gaming as it is now. Like, I have a full-time job, I have a family of 5.
Yep.
Like, I have a lot of moments where gaming isn't even an option. Like, hopefully the Switch helps that if I have to take some long car ride to some whatever, but like, you know, I put 400 hours or something like that into Halo 5 recently, and you know, I look back and go like, holy shit, that's a lot of time. Like, obviously I could have been doing way many other things that I'm sure my wife would have preferred, but Halo 5 with my buddy Jared back in, you know, in Illinois, that was, and again, like, the best thing is, the only reason why I put so much into that game is because I had someone there to play it with. Like, I had my friend Jared, who, it was the same thing. We both got off work at the same time. We were both available, but you know, from this time to this time. So we played constantly, and yeah, it's always fun when you have the same core group of people that especially bring you back, because certain multiplayer games you can kind of handle by yourself, and then certain ones you just straight can't.
Yep. Arma is one of those games where you can't. I would not be playing that game if it wasn't for the fact that I'm playing it with the people I am right now. 'Cause it's just not as fun single player. But one thing that's interesting is like this group of people, they helped me like feel a lot more natural just talking to like random people, you know, because, you know, I'm talking to them over the internet, and a lot of the time we're playing with new people who just come once and then leave. And like, it really kind of helped my social anxiety, because it's not like face to face contact, but it kind of like helped me open up more. and made me feel comfortable. So I kind of like have them to thank for that.
Yeah, especially like now you're talking to me, a random person on the internet who you've never talked to before other than a Facebook message to coordinate this. So yeah, I mean, that, obviously it definitely worked out for you. So if people wanted to see, like, do you do any Twitch streaming or anything like that?
I mean, I did. I don't really, do that much anymore. Like I posted like some Arma videos on my personal YouTube account recently, but I don't really expect anything out of it. It's just there for fun.
Well, if people wanted to play any games with you, like if there's people out there that are into Arma 3, what is your Steam name? Like, how would they find you on there?
My Steam name is Angularity. It's like angular with itty at the end.
There you go.
And that's also my YouTube kind of account name now as well. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, if people out there want to play Arma 3 and, you know, possibly play with somebody that's not some scrub who just runs and leaves after one game, go ahead and send them a message. So,
yeah, I have a group of like 5 people who play regularly, and we don't mind having a couple more if you're just not looking to take it too seriously, I guess.
Yeah, definitely don't. I'm not in the PC realm where I have a, like keyboard and mouse for me. It's just, I might as well be playing with my feet. It's just real bad. I just can't do it.
You get there. Yeah. I don't really remember like the switch from the controller to keyboard and mouse. I like now I can't play shooters on controller. Like it's just it's too much for me, and my brain doesn't work that way anymore.
Oh yeah, like especially you get those people that go keyboard and mouse route and then they can't go back, and then you get people that play controllers their whole life and they look at keyboard and mouse like me, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to stop. So, I mean, that happens. Again, it just depends on how each person, how their habits were when they were younger. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you being on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was
definitely
put a lot of fun. So,
I'll put your name in the show notes. Hopefully you'll catch some cool people playing some games with you.
Definitely. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad that I could share some of my thoughts with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so that's another great episode of the show. Again, thank you very much, Michael, for being on the show, sharing your stories with us. If anybody out there wants to be on an episode of the show, please send me a tweet at MitchPower1116, or go ahead and send a tweet to the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast. Again, don't forget to subscribe, rate, share the show with your friends. I appreciate everybody in the community who is listening and contributing and asking to be on the show. It means a lot to me. Again, thank you guys so much, and I will catch you guys next week.